Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our blower motor. There's a couple options, so you want to make sure you've got the right one. Just go ahead and look at the bottom side, take a peek underneath the passenger side dash, and confirm. After that, make your way to the back seat. Let's go ahead and grab onto the front of that back seat. We're going to lift it straight up. Once it's unclipped, move it out of the way, and that exposes the battery. Go ahead and disconnect the negative battery terminal and set it aside from the battery. Now that that's disconnected, let's make our way back over to the passenger side front. Now from under the dash, the first thing that I always like to do is take down this panel right here. You're going to find two 7mm headed bolts, one over towards the driver's side and one on the passenger side. Remove the pair. In the center, there's a push clip. Let's go ahead and use a fork tool or trim tool. We can get right in between this area, carefully separate it. Now we can take this, start bringing it down, paying attention to our wiring. Let's disconnect that. In the center, you can find a little squeeze tab. I'm going to squeeze that in. We can separate this. Once you have it apart, give it a quick inspection. Make sure you don't see any funny colors. If you do, it's corrosion and it would need to be dealt with. Now we can make our way up to the glove box itself. Let's go ahead and open it up, clean it out from anything that might be inside. The next thing we're going to do is start removing this inner portion right here. You're going to find several Phillips head screws that hold it in. We're going to go ahead and remove all of these, starting with this one right here, and then we'll make our way down. Now we can start taking this out of here. Keep in mind that you're going to have electrical wires that lead to the back of this switch. So as we start pulling it away, don't put a tug on those wires. Carefully get in between here with a trim tool, being very careful not to damage anything. Once I'm in between this area, I can carefully pull it away. You should hear it unclip. With all those screws out of there, let's have a look at the far back right here. You're going to see that there's another locking piton that's going to hold this in. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully start prying on the outer aspect of this a little bit, and we're going to try to pop it right out of there. You can see it pops out. Now we can continue on by removing this. Before we continue on any further, let's go ahead and disconnect this electrical connector. To do that, I'm going to use a small pocket screwdriver, come right down along the side right here, and there should be a tab that I can get in between, and then I can separate the two. Quick inspection, set it aside. Now let's work on getting this out of here. You're just going to have to finagle it back and forth, up and down a little bit. You can see the areas that it wants to get stuck on. Remove it from the vehicle. Now we can go ahead and close this. We'll get back to this in a minute. The next thing we need to do is start pulling down the carpet from this area right here. There's going to be an insulator underneath this area that we're also going to have to get out of the way so we can bring the blower motor down eventually. To get this carpet out of the way, I'm going to come right over here to this trim panel. We're going to use our plastic trim tool so we don't damage any paint or even the seal, and we'll start popping this up and out of here and remove it so we can start pulling back the carpet. Give it a quick inspection, set it aside. Grab onto that carpet. We're going to go ahead and carefully start folding it down and pulling it aside. With the carpet out of the way, let's move along to this area right here. You can see that it has several electrical connectors on it. You don't necessarily have to disconnect any of those. I'm just going to grab onto this. We're going to give it a little wiggle side to side and start pulling it down at the same time. Once it's down, you can go ahead and carefully hang it aside, being very careful not to damage it in any way. Now we're going to start removing the bracket that holds it to the blower motor compartment. To access that easier, let's open up that glove box again. At this point, you have a nice clear view of the bracket that it was mounted to and the two mounting screws that hold it to the unit. Go ahead and remove the pair. Go ahead and remove the pair using a 7mm socket. Reach underneath, grab that bracket. We're going to go ahead and pull that down from there. This should slide aside. Making our way back underneath the dash, let's go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector for the blower motor. I'm going to carefully get in between this area, gently pry, and then separate the two. Quick inspection, as always. Looks good. Go ahead and set that aside. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the wiring that's connected to the blower motor. Looking at it, you can see several brackets that hold it on. For those, you just go ahead and slide it right down. That looks like it's clear over there. All right. Let's go ahead and take these wires. We're going to slide them up a little bit higher than the blower motor area. Get them right out of the way. Now that we have the wires out of the way, let's start removing all of our mounting bolts. For these, you're going to find several of them making their way all the way around. If you're unsure of where any of your mounting bolts might go into your blower motor, just go ahead and take a look at the new one. You can see all the mounting areas that go all the way around, and if you look closely, you can also see where the hidden one is found. To start removing all of these mounting bolts, you're going to use a 5.5 millimeter. For some of the mounting bolts, especially the ones towards the front, it's better to use a wrench. Other bolts, you can go ahead and use a socket with a ratchet. Typically when I do these, I like to start with the back. It's the hardest to get to, so it only makes sense. I'm going to try to find that hidden one. This one's easiest to just go ahead and feel. It's up inside this corner, pretty much directly up against this wall. All right, we've only got 2 bolts left. Last one right up here. Now at this point, keep in mind there isn't anything going to be holding the blower motor in. Just go ahead and hold on to it. Now we're going to have to start finagling this out of here. So all I'm going to do is gently start pulling down and twisting at the same time. And essentially what we need to happen is the cage for the blower motor needs to come down and through the box. I have to try to roll this out of here carefully. Okay friends, now it's time to get ready to install our brand new blower motor assembly. Let's start putting this under the dash at an angle like this. All right, so now that we have it back in there, let's just go ahead and line up all of our mounting bolts. We can start them all in, and then we'll snug them up. You want to make sure you don't have any of your wiring in between the blower motor and the housing. Just go ahead and push that right out of the way. Slide this up. Alright, now let's start snugging these up. I'm going to start with the center one, or the hidden bolt. Just get my tool in there. Make sure that's nice and tight. All right, now that all the bolts are tight, we can go ahead and put in our wiring. Now that that's nice and tight, let's reconnect that blower motor. Now at this point, it's a good idea to go ahead and test that blower motor. If you were going to do that, go ahead and just reconnect that negative battery terminal, test it, and then after that, I would always recommend to re-disconnect the battery before you continue on with any more wiring. Now we can start resecuring our wiring. Obviously, you don't want to leave it dangling like this. If you were to look at it, you can see that you have all those mounting clips. The mounting clips themselves are essentially just going to slide onto the areas on the blower motor that you can see that it should be able to slide onto. Essentially, as long as it's not hanging down where it could potentially get caught on anything, you should be good to go. We're going to leave this wire down because we're going to be reconnecting this in a minute. Let's get this bracket reattached. Open up your glove box. Now I can reach from underneath. We can line up our bracket with the mounting holes, start in both of our mounting bolts, and then snug them up. Make sure the bracket's nice and tight. Now we can grab this piece again. We're going to get ready to line this up. When you look at it, you can see that you have these two areas that look like they're kind of angled a little bit, and they have a bevel that leads down in between this area. That needs to slide up and into here. You can see that these have an angle as well. Go ahead and line it up perfectly, slide it up and in, and make sure it locks in with this tab. You should hear a little clunk. There we are. Give it a little wiggle to make sure this is secure so it can't fall down while you're driving. Now we can carefully roll the carpet back into position, being very careful for any wiring that might be under the area. Now it's time to go ahead and insert our trim piece. I'm going to turn this over so we can have a quick peek. Looking at this area along here, you can see you have a little piton. And then as you follow it towards the rear of it, you're also going to find several others. Each of those little pitons need to fit into their corresponding holes that go along the body of the vehicle. Let's go ahead and slide this up and over the carpet. This is what's going to be holding the carpet in place. The carpet does not go on top of this. Now I'm going to line up the forward one. We'll lock that in. All the rest of them should be lined up. Just go ahead and start sliding it down. Once it feels as though they're lined up, give it a loving bonk. Make sure it's completely secure. That feels good. Now we can start putting on the lower protective panel from this area. Of course, we're going to want to make sure that we reconnect to this. Line it up, latch it in, listen for a click. Make sure it's secure. Now we can just take this wire, we're going to set it right up along the top of this. We're going to slide it in. Now we can line up all of our bolt holes across here. For the center, we're just going to go ahead and hold this in with this push clip. Now we can start in both of our 7mm mounting bolts. And then snug them up. Time for the glove box insert. Before we start putting it in, let's also remember that we do have the wiring that needs to be connected. So just keep that in mind. We're going to set this aside. We'll just start sliding this into position. Once it seems as though it's close enough, you can connect in your wiring. Now we want to remember that we have the little locking tab facing towards the passenger side. Go ahead and line it up, slide it in, listen for a click. There it is. Give it a little tug to make sure it's secure. I like to slide the wires down along the side. Now we can carefully slide this into position. We're going to try to line up that little piton in the back of this with the hole. Once it's lined up, press it in. Now you can start in all three of your mounting screws. Don't forget, the one on the passenger side is supposed to have the strap. Snug them up. close the glove box. Let's reconnect our negative battery terminal. Make sure that's nice and tight. Go ahead and grab onto this, give it a wiggle. It cannot be loose in any way. Just double check that positive too for good measure. Now at this point, we're gonna start putting the back seat on, but as you're gonna notice, you have several of these belt buckles. All of these belt buckles need to be in the upright position for safety. Slide that back as far as it can go, and then press down the front. Make sure it's secure. Double check to make sure all the seatbelt buckles are up. Now that we have it all back together, let's go ahead and test it and make sure it functions properly. Perfect. Thanks for watching.